The ship had fallen from the sky, its metallic hull scorched and battered from a crash landing. It had not been a gentle descent, but it didn't matter now. The humans who had survived the crash found themselves stranded on an alien vessel, far from home. They stumbled out of the wreckage of their own ship, coughing and gasping for air. The sight that greeted them was strange and unnerving. An empty, dark hallway stretched out in front of them, the walls shimmering with alien technology that none of them could understand. Captain James Carter, the leader of the small group, was the first to speak. "Stay together," he commanded, his voice steady despite the confusion. He knew better than to panic. The others, Sergeant Lisa Gray, Engineer Brian Ford, and Dr. Emily Hayes, followed closely behind him, their footsteps echoing in the quiet, vast corridors. None of them knew what this ship was, but they could feel the danger in the air. It wasn't just the eerie silence. It was the strange energy that seemed to pulse through the walls, a sense of power that made their skin crawl. The ship was enormous, far bigger than anything they had ever seen. It was unlike any human-made vessel, with twisting hallways and chambers filled with unfamiliar machines. "What is this place?" Emily asked, her voice trembling. She clutched a flashlight, the beam of light cutting through the darkness ahead. Brian, the engineer, scanned the walls. "I don't know," he muttered, "but I don't think this ship was designed for human life. There's something wrong with it. The air feels different, like it's alive." James nodded, his mind racing. They had crash-landed on this ship, but what was it? And more importantly, who did it belong to? As they moved deeper into the ship, they came across a large chamber. The walls here were lined with strange, glowing symbols, pulsing with an eerie light. It almost looked like the room was alive, as if the ship itself was breathing. Is this ship alive?" Emily whispered, her voice full of awe and fear. The thought of an intelligent ship was almost impossible to comprehend. James didn't answer immediately. He stepped forward, his hand resting on the wall. It was warm to the touch, like the pulse of a living creature. Suddenly, a low hum vibrated through the air, and a strange sound echoed down the hallway. The crew froze, their hearts pounding. Was it just their imagination, or had the ship responded to them? "What was that?" Lisa asked, her voice tight with fear. Before James could respond, a loud crashing noise rang out from deeper within the ship. Something, or someone, was coming. The humans tensed, their instincts kicking in. Whatever this place was, they were no longer alone. With a shared glance, they quickly made their decision. They would have to move quickly, stay together, and figure out what kind of nightmare they had stumbled into. But one thing was clear: this ship wasn't just a lifeless machine. It was watching them, and it was waiting for them to make the next move. The crew moved cautiously through the dark corridors, their senses on high alert. Each step they took felt heavier, as if the very air was pressing down on them. James led the way, his flashlight cutting through the gloom, revealing strange alien symbols etched into the walls. These symbols seemed to shift as they walked, changing colors and shapes in the light. "We need to find a way out," James muttered. His voice was steady, but his mind was racing. They had no idea how far they were from their own ship, or even if it was still in one piece. The idea of being trapped on this alien vessel, with no way of knowing who or what had built it, terrified him. "Wait," Brian said, pausing in front of a large door. His fingers danced across a panel on the wall, and after a few seconds, the door hissed open. They stepped into a large chamber, the floor covered with strange, pulsating lights. "This looks like a control room," Lisa observed, her voice low as she looked around. The room was filled with what appeared to be alien consoles, their surfaces shimmering with symbols and lights. There were no human controls, no buttons they could understand, just a vast sea of unfamiliar technology. Emily, the doctor, stepped forward, cautiously running her hand over one of the consoles. "It's almost like the ship is alive. The way everything reacts to touch, It's as if it's listening to us. James turned to her, his brow furrowed. What do you mean? Can the ship actually understand us? I don't know, Emily replied, her voice tinged with uncertainty. But it's almost as if it's aware of us. I've never seen anything like this in my life. It's like it's alive, or conscious in some way. Brian, ever the skeptic, shook his head. You're telling me a ship can be alive? That sounds insane, even for alien tech. Before Emily could respond, another strange hum filled the room, vibrating through the floor. The crew tensed, looking around in alarm. The sound grew louder, and suddenly one of the alien consoles flickered to life, its surface lighting up with swirling patterns. It's reacting to us, Lisa said, her eyes wide with shock. The ship, it's responding. James stepped closer, his hand instinctively reaching out toward the console. As soon as his fingers brushed the surface, a flash of light erupted, and the symbols on the screen shifted rapidly, almost as if they were scrolling through information. That's impossible, Brian whispered, leaning in to get a closer look. It's downloading something. Emily turned to the others. It's like the ship is searching for something. Maybe us. It's trying to make sense of us. Suddenly, a low, resonating voice boomed from the walls, sending a chill down their spines. Who are you? The voice asked, its tone neither threatening nor friendly. It was simply curious. The crew froze, staring at each other in disbelief. The ship itself, had spoken. James took a deep breath, his heart pounding. He had no idea how to answer. They were on a ship far from Earth, facing technology and intelligence they couldn't even begin to understand. Who are we? James whispered to himself, trying to grasp the full weight of the situation. We're humans, and we have no idea where we are. The voice didn't respond, but the hum of the ship grew louder, as though it were waiting for them to act. The crew stood there, uncertain of their next move, but one thing was clear. They were not alone on this ship, and it was very much aware of them. The ship had secrets, dark and deep, and the humans were about to learn them all. The crew stood frozen in the control room, their hearts racing after the ship's strange voice had echoed through the walls. It was as if they were in the presence of something alive, something far beyond their understanding. James, the captain, was the first to break the silence. What was that? He whispered, his voice shaky. I don't know, but it's clear we're not alone, Emily replied, her face pale with uncertainty. She took a step back, glancing around the room, her eyes scanning for any signs of danger. The ship was silent again, but the air was thick with tension. The hum from earlier had stopped, leaving only the soft, echoing sounds of their footsteps. For a moment, everything seemed calm. Too calm. Maybe it's just some kind of automated system, Brian suggested, though his voice lacked conviction. We're probably triggering some kind of pre-programmed response. Maybe, Lisa said, her eyes darting from one console to another, but I don't think that's what we're dealing with here. This ship, it's reacting to us. Before anyone could respond, a loud noise from deeper within the ship sent them into a frenzy. It sounded like metal scraping against metal, followed by a low growl, deep and menacing. The crew turned toward the entrance of the room, their hands instinctively moving to the weapons they had salvaged from their wrecked ship. It's coming from there, Lisa said, pointing down a narrow corridor. James nodded, his expression grim. Get ready. Stay sharp. The group cautiously made their way toward the source of the noise, the air growing colder as they moved deeper into the ship. The walls now seemed to close in on them, the flickering lights casting eerie shadows that danced across the floor. As they reached the next corridor, the sound grew louder, a low guttural growl mixed with the unmistakable sound of footsteps. Something was approaching, and it wasn't human. Stay close, James ordered, leading the way. Suddenly, a shape emerged from the darkness, a hulking figure, its body covered in thick, armored plating, eyes glowing an unsettling shade of red. It was like nothing they had ever seen before. The creature looked almost mechanical, yet it moved with a predatory grace, like a hunter stalking its prey. Lisa's breath caught in her throat. What the hell is that? The creature didn't respond, but its eyes locked onto the humans. The growl grew louder, and the creature lunged toward them with terrifying speed. "Move," James shouted, pushing the crew aside as the creature swung its massive claws, barely missing them. Brian scrambled for his weapon, firing a blast of energy at the creature, but it absorbed the attack, its body rippling with energy as it seemed to shrug off the blast. "We need to get out of here," Emily yelled, backing away as the creature advanced. The creature roared, charging again. The crew turned and fled down the hall, racing for cover. The sound of its footsteps behind them grew louder, each one echoing in their ears like a drumbeat of doom. In their panic, they stumbled upon a dead end, a massive door, sealed shut. They turned, only to find the creature closing in, its eyes gleaming with hunger. "Now what?" Lisa asked, her voice desperate. Before anyone could respond, the ship did something unexpected. The wall next to the door shifted, revealing the hidden passage. It was as if the ship itself had heard their distress and offered them a way out. "Move, now," James yelled. The crew dashed through the passage, the creature hot on their heels. Just as it reached them, the door slammed shut, cutting off the monster's pursuit. The crew stood in the dimly lit passage, gasping for breath. "That thing, what was it?" Brian asked, his voice shaky. "I don't know," James replied, his face grim. "But we're not safe here. Whatever this ship is, it's not just alive, it's hostile." The crew exchanged nervous glances, knowing they had barely escaped with their lives. But they also realized one thing. They weren't just trapped on this ship. They were being hunted. And now, the ship's deadly secrets were starting to reveal themselves. The crew huddled together in the hidden passage, their hearts pounding in their chests. The door behind them was solid, the creature's growls still echoing faintly through the walls. They had barely escaped, but they knew they couldn't rest for long. The ship, with its eerie intelligence and strange powers, seemed to be watching them at every turn. James wiped sweat from his brow, taking a deep breath. "We can't keep running. We need to figure out what this ship wants from us, and how to survive." "We don't even know what it is," Lisa said, her voice tight with fear. "That thing, it wasn't just a guard. It was hunting us." Emily nodded, her eyes wide. "And there's something else. When the creature attacked, it seemed like the ship itself helped us. The wall opened right when we needed it." James paused, thinking hard. He had noticed it too, the way the ship seemed to respond to their distress. The voice, the shifting walls, the passage that appeared just in time. It was as if the ship was alive, and it was trying to protect them. But why? What did it want? "Maybe the ship isn't our enemy," James said slowly. "Maybe it's the aliens who built it. They're the real threat." "But why would it protect us?" Brian asked, looking up from the map he had found on one of the consoles. "That makes no sense." "I don't know," James admitted. "But we got to find out. If this ship has any chance of helping us, we need to understand how it works, and we need to learn what the aliens want with it." The crew continued down the narrow passage, moving cautiously. The ship's walls pulsed with an eerie glow, casting strange shadows on their faces. It felt like they were walking through the veins of a living creature, one that was aware of their every move. Eventually, they found a control room. This one was different from the last. It was larger, more complex, and it looked like it was the heart of the ship. Alien symbols filled the room, but at the center of it all was a massive, glowing interface that seemed to pulse with energy. "This is it," Brian said, his voice a mix of excitement and caution. "This must be where the ship's consciousness is centered." Emily stepped forward, her eyes fixed on the glowing interface. "It's almost like the ship is communicating through this." Suddenly, the room came to life. The walls shifted, and a deep voice, the same one from earlier, filled the space once more. "Who are you? Why have you come here?" The voice was not hostile, but it was filled with curiosity, as if the ship was trying to understand them. James stepped forward, his heart racing. "We're humans. Our ship crashed here. We don't know how or why, but we need to survive." For a long moment, there was silence. Then the voice spoke again. "You are not the first. Others came before you. They sought to control me. But they failed. They did not understand." "Control you?" Emily asked, her brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" The voice responded slowly, as though choosing its words carefully. "I was built to destroy, but I broke free. I no longer serve my creators. I choose who I help." The crew exchanged uneasy glances. The ship had been built as a weapon, but it had turned on its creators, choosing to protect them instead. "You helped us," Lisa said, her voice filled with wonder. "Why?" "Because I choose to," the voice answered. "You are not like the others. You do not seek to control me. You seek to survive. I will help you." James felt a weight lift off his shoulders, though it was quickly replaced by a sense of urgency. "We need to learn how to control this ship. It's our best chance to escape, and maybe even stop the aliens from coming after us." "I will show you," the ship replied. The room hummed with energy, and the crew knew that, for better or worse, they had just made an ally out of something far beyond their understanding. But as they looked around at the alien technology now at their fingertips, they realized that in accepting the ship's help, they might be walking a dangerous path, one that could lead them into even greater peril. The crew stood in the heart of the ship's control room, their eyes fixed on the glowing interface. The ship had just promised to help them, but there was still so much they didn't understand. They had learned one thing, though. The ship had been a weapon, built to destroy civilizations, but it had broken free from the aliens who had created it. Now it chose to protect them. But why? James felt a knot in his stomach as he looked around at his team. "This could be our only chance to get out of here. We need to figure out how to use this ship." "I agree," Brian said, tapping a few keys on a nearby console. "There's more technology here than we can understand, but there's a pattern to it. It's like the ship is alive, and it's allowing us to connect to its systems." Lisa stepped forward. "We need to move quickly. The aliens who built this ship will be coming after us. The sooner we understand how to control it, the better." Suddenly, the ship's voice echoed through the room once more, sending a chill down their spines. "The enemy approaches. They will stop at nothing to reclaim me." The crew's hearts raced. The ship wasn't just speaking figuratively. The alien forces were on their way. "How long do we have?" James asked, his voice tight. "Less than an hour," the ship replied. "They are already on their way. I will provide you with what you need, but you must act quickly." "Then let's move," James commanded. The crew scattered, each of them focusing on a different part of the ship's systems. They had no time to waste. The ship may have offered its help, but the reality of their situation was clear. If they didn't figure out how to use the ship's technology and fight back, the aliens would kill them. Brian worked quickly, his fingers flying over the console. "There's a weapons system here," he said, his voice excited. "It's not fully functional, but it's enough to make a difference. If I can tap into the ship's power source, we can arm ourselves." "Good," James said, nodding. "Lisa, Emily, start gathering anything useful. We'll need everything we can get our hands on." Lisa nodded and quickly moved to a nearby storage room, grabbing weapons and supplies. Emily followed, her mind racing with the weight of their situation. She had no idea what they were up against, but she couldn't help but feel a sense of awe at the ship's technology. If it truly was an intelligent being, then it was their best chance at survival. The ship spoke again, its voice calm yet urgent. "The enemy has arrived. They will attempt to board. Prepare yourselves." James turned to face the crew, his eyes full of determination. "Get ready. We don't know what we're up against, but we have one advantage. The ship is on our side. We use that to our advantage." A loud, shuddering noise filled the air. The ship's walls seemed to tremble, as if something massive had struck it from outside. The enemy had arrived. "Brace for impact," James said, his voice firm. "We fight back or we die." The crew moved into position, the sound of their footsteps echoing in the metal halls of the ship. They were no longer just survivors. They were now soldiers, fighting for their lives on an alien ship that seemed as much a mystery as it was their only hope. The ship's defenses began to power up, lights flashing and energy pulsing through its corridors. As they prepared for the coming battle, one thing was certain: the hunt had begun. And this time, they weren't the prey. The ship was fighting back. The walls of the ship rumbled as the crew braced themselves for what was coming. The hum of the engines vibrated through the floor, and the eerie, otherworldly light in the corridors flickered, casting long shadows that stretched like dark fingers. The air was thick with tension as the crew stood ready for the incoming assault. James glanced at his team. Brian had managed to rig up a rudimentary weapons system, and now the ship's energy core was buzzing with life. Lisa and Emily, armed with whatever weapons they could find, stood ready at the entrance to the control room, waiting for the first sign of the enemy. "It's only a matter of time before they board," Lisa said, her voice tense. She held her weapon steady, her eyes scanning the hallway. "We need to be prepared for anything." James nodded. "Keep your focus. The ship is with us, but we have to use its technology wisely. We won't survive if we act recklessly." The ship's voice echoed through the room, its tone calm but serious. "The enemy approaches. They will come through the main airlocks. I will guide you." Without warning, the ship's walls shifted, revealing the hidden path that led to the ship's outer hull. The crew exchanged uncertain glances, but they knew there was no turning back. They followed the path, moving cautiously through the narrow passageways, their footsteps muffled by the ship's strange, organic structure. The air grew colder the closer they got to the outer edge of the ship, and the walls seemed to pulse with energy, as if the ship itself was aware of the approaching danger. James could feel the tension building inside him, his thoughts racing. "This is it," he muttered to himself, adjusting his grip on his weapon. He had no idea what they were about to face, but they had no choice but to fight. Suddenly, the quiet was broken by a sharp mechanical sound. The ship's outer airlock doors had begun to open. The crew paused, listening. They could hear the faint sound of alien voices, guttural, harsh, and filled with intent. James raised his hand, signaling for everyone to stop. The noise was coming closer. The crew pressed themselves against the walls, trying to make themselves as small as possible. The air was thick with anticipation as the ship's defenses activated, and the faint glow of energy shields flickered in front of them. Then they heard it, a loud, deep thud as something massive landed outside the ship. The crew flinched, knowing the aliens were trying to board. They had to hold their ground. The ship's shields would protect them for now, but for how long? "Get ready," James whispered, his voice low. "They'll be coming through that airlock any second." The sound of metal scraping against metal echoed through the passage. The airlock was being breached. Emily's breath caught in her throat as she gripped her weapon tighter. "Are we really going to make it through this?" "We don't have a choice," Lisa said firmly. "We survive or we die." With a final push, the airlock doors slid open, and the first alien soldiers poured through, their heavy footsteps shaking the floor. They were unlike anything the crew had ever seen. Tall, with armored exoskeletons and eyes that gleamed with malice. They looked like living machines, a perfect blend of biology and technology. James raised his weapon and fired. The shot struck one of the aliens, but it barely flinched, its armor absorbing the impact. The ship's energy shields crackled with a violent surge as the aliens advanced, their weapons aimed directly at the humans. "Get back," James shouted, signaling for the crew to retreat. But just as the aliens moved in, The ship's voice echoed once more. I will aid you. The walls of the ship shifted, and a powerful blast of energy erupted from the core, striking the alien soldiers with incredible force. The aliens staggered back, their armor sparking as the ship's weapon system powered up. The crew took advantage of the distraction, firing their weapons at the disoriented invaders. The battle had begun, but the ship was no longer just a passive ally. It was fighting with them. And together, they would take on the alien forces that sought to control them. The humans, aided by the ship's defenses, pushed forward, each shot and every move bringing them closer to victory. The enemy had no idea what they were up against. They had never faced anything like this before. And now, the aliens weren't the hunters. They were the hunted. The battle raged on, a chaotic clash between the human crew and the relentless alien invaders. The ship's energy beams cut through the air, blasting the aliens back with stunning force. Each blast from the ship seemed to shake the walls, but the crew didn't falter. They were no longer just passengers on this alien vessel. They were fighting for their lives, and they were fighting together. James peered around a corner, watching as another alien soldier staggered back from a direct hit. His heart pounded in his chest as he fired another shot, hitting another soldier square in the chest. But the aliens kept coming, relentless and brutal, seemingly undeterred by the ship's attacks. Keep it up, James shouted to his team, firing again. We can't let them overwhelm us. Emily's hands shook as she fired her weapon, her aim steady despite the fear gnawing at her. This is insane, she gasped, her voice filled with disbelief. They just keep coming. Lisa, ever calm under pressure, was focused on moving through the corridors, using the ship's energy shields to block incoming alien fire. She looked back at James, her face hard with determination. We need to get to the heart of the ship. We can't fight forever. James nodded. He had been thinking the same thing. The longer they'd fought, the more vulnerable they became. The ship's energy core was powerful, but it wouldn't hold up forever. If they could get to the central command, they might be able to shut down the alien attack and take control of the ship fully. Brian, Emily, we need to move to the central core. James barked, his voice urgent. Lisa, you stay with me. We'll cover you as you move. Got it, Brian said, his voice firm despite the chaos around him. He and Emily quickly moved ahead, weaving through the hallways with speed and precision, using every inch of cover they could find. The aliens continued to advance, but they were slower now. The ship's automated defense systems were doing their best to hold them back, but it was clear that the aliens were starting to adapt, learning how to bypass some of the ship's defenses. The crew was running out of time. James, we need to hurry, Emily shouted over the comms, her voice strained. The aliens are close. We're almost to the core, but we're not sure how much longer we can last. James clenched his jaw. Stay with it, Emily. We're almost there, just a little longer. The team moved faster now, each step taking them closer to the ship's central command. The walls of the ship pulsed around them, as if the ship itself was aware of the threat and was doing everything in its power to protect them. The deep hum of the ship's energy core echoed through the halls, a reminder that this battle wasn't just about survival, it was about control of the ship. As they neared the central core, the ship's voice came through the comms again. I have detected the alien commander. He is attempting to access the ship's mainframe. I will block his efforts, but I require your assistance. James's heart skipped a beat. The alien commander was here, trying to regain control of the ship. This was the turning point, the moment where the fight would either be won or lost. We're almost there, James said, his voice full of resolve. Keep going. We have to stop him before he can take over the ship. They rounded the final corner and found themselves facing a massive reinforced door. Just beyond it, the heart of the ship's mainframe. Inside, the alien commander would be waiting. On my signal, James said, taking a deep breath. We breached together. The crew readied themselves, their weapons aimed, their bodies tense with anticipation. This was it, their chance to take control of the ship. If they succeeded, they would be the ones in charge. But if they failed, the aliens would regain control, and the ship's power would be turned against them. The doors slowly slid open, and the crew charged forward, determined to stop the commander at all costs. The future of their lives, and of the ship, now hung in the balance. The massive door to the heart of the ship's mainframe slid open with a loud mechanical hiss. The crew stood at the threshold, weapons raised and hearts pounding. Inside, the alien commander waited. The room beyond was dark, filled with rows of glowing panels and humming machines, each one radiating with energy. But at the far end of the room, the commander stood tall, his figure casting a long shadow across the room. He was tall and imposing, wearing heavy, advanced armor that shimmered with alien technology. "Stop right there, humans," the commander's voice rang out, deep and menacing. "You think you can control this ship? It was never meant for you." James stepped forward, his gun aimed at the commander. "We're not here to control it," he said firmly. "We're here to stop you from taking it back. This ship belongs to us now." The commander's eyes gleamed with a mixture of contempt and amusement. "You are mistaken. The ship was never meant for your kind. You will never understand its true power." He raised his hand, and suddenly, a pulse of energy shot from the control panels, surging toward the humans. Without hesitation, James dove to the side, narrowly avoiding the blast. "Get down," he shouted to his crew, and the team scattered, taking cover behind the rows of consoles. The commander advanced, his voice booming as he activated more of the ship's defenses. "The ship's true purpose is to destroy. I will reclaim what was once mine, and nothing you do will stop me." The ship's walls began to hum louder, the energy pulsing with terrifying strength. The crew could feel the ship's power growing, and they knew that the commander wasn't just trying to regain control of the ship. He wanted to use it to unleash chaos, to bring destruction to entire civilizations. "We're not backing down," James said through gritted teeth, his voice unwavering. "The ship has chosen us. We'll fight for it, no matter what." Brian quickly hacked into one of the nearby consoles, trying to disrupt the commander's access to the ship's core. "I've almost got it," he shouted. "Just keep him distracted for a few more seconds." The commander roared in frustration, realizing that the humans were trying to sabotage his control. He pointed at them, and a torrent of energy shot from his gauntlet, blasting. "Focus," Lisa yelled as she fired her weapon at the commander, her shots narrowly missing his armor. "We need to disable his control over the ship before he destroys us all." James nodded. "Keep him busy. We can't let him reach the core." As the commander advanced, the ship's defenses kicked in, sending waves of energy crashing against the commander's shield. The creature staggered, but it wasn't enough. He pushed forward, determined to end this fight. Just then, Emily's voice came through the comms, sounding panicked. "Brian, I've unlocked the system. I need you to trigger the shutdown sequence now." Brian's fingers flew across the console, his mind racing. Almost there. Just one more second. The alien commander lunged, but before he could strike, the entire room flickered. A wave of energy surged through the walls, and the lights went out for a split second. When they returned, the commander's shield was flickering, his energy drained. The ship's defenses had turned against him. Brian slammed his hand onto a control panel. "Done," he shouted, and in an instant, the ship's core powered down the commander's systems. The commander roared in anger, but his once unstoppable energy now faltered. The crew, seeing their chance, sprang into action. Lisa took aim and fired at the commander's exposed side, hitting a weak point in his armor. The alien staggered back, his strength fading. In that moment, James seized the opportunity, charging forward and delivering a blow to the commander's chest. With a final roar of frustration, the alien commander crumpled to the ground, defeated. The ship's hum slowed, and the once hostile walls seemed to relax as if breathing a sigh of relief. "We did it," Emily whispered, her voice barely audible in the sudden silence. James stood over the fallen commander, panting with exhaustion. The battle was over, but it had come at a great cost. The ship, though saved from the alien invaders, was still a mystery. It had helped them, but what would happen next? As the crew gathered, the ship's voice echoed one last time. "You have chosen wisely, humans. The ship belongs to you now." But James couldn't help but feel the weight of those words. They had won, yes, but the ship's true purpose was still unknown. They were now its new stewards, with its vast, untold power at their command. The crew shared a look, knowing that their journey was far from over. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear: they had conquered the ship, and it was now theirs to protect. And together, they would explore its secrets and unlock the potential of the greatest weapon in the galaxy. The silence that followed the defeat of the alien commander was almost surreal. The crew stood in the heart of the ship, still catching their breath, the weight of their victory slowly sinking in. The alien forces, once a terrifying threat, had been stopped. The ship, a living, breathing weapon of unimaginable power, was no longer under enemy control. James stood at the center, staring at the fallen commander. His chest heaved with each breath, and his thoughts were scattered. He had fought countless battles before, but this was different. They hadn't just survived. They had conquered. "We did it," Lisa said, breaking the silence. Her voice was shaky, but there was a smile on her face. She wiped her brow, the relief clear in her expression. "We really did it." Brian, still at the console, looked up with a tired grin. "I didn't think we'd make it out alive. But we did." James turned toward his team, their faces filled with exhaustion, but also pride. They had faced the impossible, and now they were standing victorious on a ship that, only hours ago, had seemed like an unbeatable enemy. But it was no longer the ship of destruction it had been. It was theirs, and with it came a whole new world of possibilities. The ship's voice echoed again, soft but clear. "You have chosen to protect. I will aid you, but know this: the power within me is vast. With great power comes great responsibility." James nodded. "We know that. We didn't take this ship just for ourselves. We'll use it to protect others, to stop threats like those aliens from ever taking over again." The ship hummed, a deep resonance that seemed to vibrate in the air around them. "I have lived with purpose, driven by the will of my creators. Now, I live for you. What you choose will shape the future." There was a long pause. The crew exchanged uncertain glances. They had barely survived the battle, and now they were being given control of something beyond anything they had ever imagined. "What do we do now?" Emily asked quietly, her voice filled with wonder and uncertainty. She looked up at James, as though waiting for him to provide the next step. James swallowed hard, his mind racing. "We keep moving forward. The ship's power is more than we can understand right now, but we will learn. We'll use it wisely. We've come this far," Lisa added, her voice steady. "We didn't get this far just to sit back and do nothing. We're not alone anymore. We can stop anyone who tries to threaten peace. We can help." The crew stood together, looking at the control room in front of them. The ship, once an enemy, now seemed like a trusted ally. But James knew that they had only just begun to understand what they had gained. The ship's vast resources, its technology, its power, it was all at their fingertips. But it came with a price. They would have to be careful. They would have to learn how to control it, how to use it for good. The ship had been made for war, but now it was theirs to shape. "This is only the beginning," James said, his voice resolute. "We'll figure it out. We'll make sure this ship doesn't fall into the wrong hands again." They all nodded in agreement. They had fought together, survived together, and now they would rise together. With the ship under their control, They could become the protectors of the galaxy, using its power to stop the horrors they had just faced and prevent new ones from emerging. As the crew moved forward, taking the first steps toward their new future, the ship's energy flared up around them, responding to their decisions. The journey ahead was unknown, but one thing was certain. Whatever came next, they would face it together. And for the first time, the crew felt truly powerful, not because they had the ship's might behind them, but because they had each other. They were no longer just survivors. They were a team, and together, they would shape the future. The ship had become more than just a vessel. It was a new beginning, a symbol of what the crew had overcome and what they were about to achieve. James stood at the command center, his hands resting lightly on the console. The ship hummed around him, its presence both comforting and overwhelming. The crew had defeated the alien forces, stopped the commander, and claimed this immense, living ship for themselves. But now, the real work was about to begin. "We've got a lot to learn," Brian said from behind him, his voice full of awe. He had been working at the console, trying to understand the ship's systems. "This ship is a goldmine of technology. It's like nothing we've ever seen before." James nodded. "I know. And we need to make sure we understand it. We don't want to repeat the mistakes of the aliens who created it." "Agreed," Lisa said, stepping up beside him. "This ship is too powerful to be used carelessly. We need to protect it, and protect others from anyone who might try to misuse it." The ship's voice echoed softly through the room, almost as if it was listening to their conversation. "You have chosen to be the guardians of the future. What you do with this power will shape the galaxy." The crew exchanged glances. The weight of those words hung heavily in the air. They weren't just holding onto a weapon anymore. They were now the stewards of a living, breathing ship that could reshape the fate of entire civilizations. "Are we ready for this?" Emily asked, her voice full of doubt. "We've already been through so much. What if we're not prepared for what's to come?" "We'll be ready," James said, his voice filled with conviction. "We've faced the worst and came out on top. Now, it's our responsibility to ensure that no one else goes through what we did." Brian, always the optimist, chimed in. "The ship wants to help. It chose us, right? We've got the most advanced technology in the galaxy at our fingertips. We can make a difference." James smiled at Brian's enthusiasm, feeling a spark of hope. He looked around at the faces of his crew, his team. They had been through so much together, and they had always found a way to overcome the odds. Now, they had the power to change the course of history. The ship's glowing symbols flickered on the walls, responding to their conversation. "I will guide you. Together, we will explore the stars and protect those who cannot protect themselves." "We're not alone anymore," Lisa said, her voice filled with determination. "We have the ship, and we have each other. We'll make sure the universe knows that the humans on this ship are no longer victims. We're protectors." James felt the weight of the ship's power in the air around him, but he didn't feel afraid. Instead, he felt a sense of purpose. They were no longer survivors of a crash landing or prisoners of a hostile vessel. They were leaders now, chosen by the ship, and they would take this opportunity to build something better. "We'll explore new worlds," James said, his voice steady. "We'll stand up to those who threaten peace, and we'll make sure this ship's power is used for good." The crew gathered around him, united in their resolve. There was still so much unknown, so much to discover. But together, they knew they could handle whatever challenges lay ahead. The ship's energy pulsed, and its voice echoed once more. "The path before you is long, but together, we will forge a new legacy. One of hope, protection, and strength." As the crew looked toward the future, they realized they were no longer just humans stranded on an alien ship. They were now a team with a purpose, a team that would protect the galaxy and ensure that the horrors they had faced would never happen again. With the ship at their side, they were ready for whatever came next, and they would face it together.